Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Ryan Lee, back here once again, and I hope you continue to stay safe amongst the pandemic. We got a whole load of things for you here today, including some of the latest news within the NFL, as well as some new updates regarding the draft. And finally, we are going to be going into a long-awaited segment of Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. Yes, I'm going to be talking betting odds once again. Let's get right into that one. In terms of the updates regarding just the entirety of the NFL draft, or just the NFL as a whole, and the NCAA, the links have been there. Obviously, you can't get to the NFL without getting to the college ranks. But the way you get to the pro game in the NFL is by far the most difficult and the trickiest in terms of how much time you have to spend in order to even get drafted in the first place. Because in a lot of these other sports, let's just say in the NBA, you get a lot of these guys, they spend a single year in the college system, and then they can also continue to stay in college for however many years. So sometimes you get guys who are drafted who were just freshmen, like R.J. Barrett was when he was with the Knicks, and Zion Williamson was the same year. There used to be a rule where they could allow high schoolers to come straight out of high school and play in the NBA. You had LeBron do that, Kobe do that. And then you have a bunch of guys who took several years, 3, maybe 4 years in the college system, and didn't declare for the NBA draft until they were juniors and seniors. Steph Curry, fantastic example. You also get some other sports like the NHL, who in order to declare for the NHL draft, I believe you just need to be over 18. But all these players, they're literally from all over the world. You have guys who are playing in junior leagues in the States. They're playing in the NCAA system. They're playing in the Canadian system, the Swedish system, Finnish, Russian, whatever country it is that has players. You have all these players who are from all around the world, essentially, and they get drafted straight out of any country. So, for example, the 2020 NHL draft, Alexis Lafreniere, he was drafted out of the one of the Canadian junior systems. I'll just go an example off the top of my head. Jack Hughes, drafted first overall in 2019, I believe. He was drafted out of the United States Developmental Player Program. Rasmus Dahlin in 2018, drafted by Buffalo Sabres number 1 overall. He gets drafted by the Swedish Elite League. In 2015, you had Connor McDavid, drafted by the Edmonton Oilers. He got drafted by the Erie Otters after the Ontario Hockey League, which is a really big junior league for players under the age of 18. So you essentially have these guys in all these other sports who get drafted or get put into the program for, 18, 19 years old. And these guys are, for the most part, they're kids. Depending on where you get drafted, they can go get their bodies tumbled and bodied by guys 10 years older than them and 100 pounds heavier than them, but they're still too young to go to the local pub or bar or whatever establishment you can think of. And then you have the NFL. You have to spend at least 3 years in the college system to even get a chance to get into the draft. Joe Burrow was 24 when he got drafted. Baker Mayfield, I believe, was also 24 when he got drafted. You kind of get a lot of these guys, they're on that ballpark of 24 to 21, depending on where they got drafted, depending on if they went 3 straight years in the college system, in the NCAA system, the CFP system, or maybe they went the JUCO route, they got redshirted, whatever it may be, adds a year, adds maybe 2. You get a guy who goes through the JUCO route, then gets a red shirt, and then plays their 2 years out. That's 5 years in college. So you really get this giant range of guys, but for the most part, they're fully developed guys. They're very fully developed. Their bodies, their minds, they have a lot more experience to them. And at that point, it's just a matter of who brings the most to the table. I was watching a video, I want to say it was a couple days ago, early in the week, and it was talking about the idea, the concept of how Olympic medalists, the way they place and how they place really affects the way that a certain athlete's mindset becomes. Because when Olympic medals are given out, you obviously have the silver, the bronze, and the gold. Gold for first, silver for second, and third for bronze. And when Olympic medalists are on the podium, what happens is that obviously the gold is first. You know, they're the best in the world at that time. In that 4-year stretch, this person is the best in the world at their respective event, sport, etc. And then you get the silvers. They came in second place. They came up just short. If it's a sport where it's kind of tournament style, they were the first runners up, I guess is the best word to say. You go tournament style, they're the last loser. They lost the final game. And then you get the bronze medals. Third place. In most cases, they, gave it everything they got. If you're going a tournament style type of game like hockey or soccer, football, depending on where you're situated around the world, in those cases, they lost the semifinal, but they had a cancellation game for third place, and they won that last game. So there's this theory, essentially, that says that whoever gets bronze in most Olympics, they're just happy to make it on the podium. They're just like, hey, I can walk away knowing that I was one of the best in the world at this time, that my dream of accomplishing an Olympic medal has been accomplished. And a lot of those athletes who get those bronzes, they're very fulfilled in the idea of, hey, they made it to the podium in the first place. Not many people actually do. They're very grateful because they got to do one thing that most people in their entire lifetimes will never get the chance to do, which is to stand on the Olympic podium and get that medal wrapped around their neck. The guys who win gold, they're so freaking stoked, I'm supposing, because they're just thinking, hey, I'm the best in the world at whatever just happened. I scored the ultimate victory for myself, for my team, for my country. Like, I did this. I'm at the pinnacle of the sport right now. The best in the world. And I'm one of them. This country is the best in the world at this specific sport at the specific time. And I'm that representative. I'm that guy or girl or team. We're that team. And then you get the guys who end up in second place, the silver medalists. For whatever reason, the silver medalists always end up casting a doubt on themselves. Their mindset's just in the wrong place. But it's understandable why it's the way it is. They start questioning if they gave a good enough effort. They start thinking, could they have done better? Should they have done better? What didn't work? They essentially go into this long string of, could I have done better? Should I have been better? What could I have done differently? Should I have trained harder? Should I have done faster at this point? Or should I have been more strategic at this point? Or should I have worked more on this minor detail? Or what was it? What went wrong? They think about what went wrong. They think about why they fell short and why they couldn't become the top spot. And the reason why I mention all this is because I started watching this video and then I started thinking about the NFL draft, of how many recent second overall draft picks there were. And it's not that if you're first overall or second overall or whatever it is, you can't succeed. Because there have been plenty of them who are just happy to go to a good team. They make it work. And they make successful careers of themselves. A recent example is Calvin Johnson, Megatron, Marshall Faulk, a Hall of Famer, Eric Dickerson, Lawrence Taylor, Tony Dorsett, Randy White. A lot of Hall of Famers came from number 2 overall because they're just in the right situation at the right time. However, for whatever reason, as of late, within the past couple of years, let's say, there's been this weird thing going on with number 2 overalls where their success is not as evident. Because in some cases, and the reason why they think so is because of the fact that they have that silver medalist mindset. Could they have done something better to be drafted number 1 overall? Could they have done something better to just go one slot, to be the top guy in the draft class? In some cases, it absolutely was. Because let's say you go to 1998, one of the greatest quarterback debates in recent NFL history. Peyton Manning versus Ryan Leaf. And yes, I bring up these two guys a lot, but it's also one of the most historic examples of all time and one of the most historic draft classes of all time. So I have to bring it up again. Ryan Leaf was second fiddle to Peyton Manning. But there were obviously a lot of concerns about Leaf where the Colts didn't want him and they wanted Manning. Leaf was a bigger, stronger, more athletic overall type of quarterback. However, he didn't fit the IQ test. The character test didn't fit what the Colts wanted, which is why the Colts passed up on him. Let the Chargers take him second. Just small details in his character throughout his time at Washington State just did not fit what the Colts wanted. The Chargers took him, and little they realize the guy's got some character issues that he kind of needs to work against. Reggie Bush was kind of in that similar fate. He was this super dynamic, super explosive back. He was the ultimate dual threat. And he was supposed to be the guy who could really be that additional weapon that the Saints needed. That flashy, fast, shifty, could also catch out of the backfield. He was everything. Reggie Bush was everything you can think of. In 2006, he gets drafted number 2 overall. He gets passed up by Mario Williams, who Houston ended up drafting. Mario Williams, great career, multiple Pro Bowls. I believe an All-Pro gets snuck in there as well. But then Reggie Bush, he kind of becomes very okay. Nothing super crazy. And then he does end up winning a Super Bowl with the New Orleans Saints. However, his last season in the NFL is with the Bills when they were rebuilding, and then he rushes for a grand total of a negative yardage, which was not good. And then you get a lot of guys in recent history, specifically the quarterbacks. I'm not talking about the defensive ends. I'm not talking about your Bosas or your Chase Youngs. I'm not talking about those ultimate franchise saver guys like Saquon's. I want to talk specifically about these three guys in specific because they're all quarterbacks, and according to a certain sports book, which I'll get into in the second segment, they believe that the second overall quarterback is going to be a quarterback taken by the Jets. And in recent memory, there have not been very many good quarterbacks taken number 2 overall. That's not to say that there can't be a good quarterback drafted number 2 overall. It's just that in recent memory, there really hasn't been. Because if you look at 2012, you get Luck versus RG3. That big debate, who's the better quarterback? Is Andrew Luck? Is Robert Griffin III? And Luck gets taken number 1 overall by Indianapolis. He was their guy the entire time. RG3 goes number 2 overall to the Washington football team, who back then went by a different name. And Robert Griffin, he didn't have a bad career. He had a really strong rookie year, made the Pro Bowl, but then immediately gets his ACLs torn apart. He immediately gets his knees shaken up, and because of that, doesn't really do much after that initial rookie season, where everything after that kind of becomes the role of the perennial backup. Team to team, bounces around, goes from Washington, then goes to Cleveland, then goes to Baltimore. He kind of has to sit behind the bench a lot, come in very situationally. In the case of RG3, it had nothing to do with his talent. His talent was there right out of the gate. He helped Washington get to a playoff. He made a Pro Bowl immediately. It was just a matter of poor circumstances where Washington wasn't really as committed to keeping their guy healthy. In the case of the Tennessee Titans in 2015, they took Marcus Mariota after Jameis Winston got drafted number 1 overall. Now, in the case of Mariota, it was just a matter of, I don't really know what it was with Mariota. He showed so much explosiveness, so much flash in college. However, Mariota, he really got injured quite a bit. And I think with the injury history, the Titans kind of babied him a little bit. They kind of played it very safe. Nothing super explosive, nothing super overwhelming, or nothing really popping, for lack of a better term. Because with Mariota, it was just a matter of the play was very conservative. You can get him to right around 500, 9-7 every single year. And he got injured a lot. And then you get Carson Wentz. Kind of in that similar boat. Yes, he went a Pro Bowl in 2017. He gets drafted number 2 overall to Jared Goff in 2016. Has a very solid first couple years. And then in 2017, 2018, Wentz really explodes. He becomes easily the top quarterback in the NFL at the time. He actually earned a Pro Bowl in the year where he got his ACL torn at the end of the year. That's also the year where Nick Foles had to step in and take Philly to the promised land. And he had to watch as the backup took Philly to the pinnacle of the NFL. When he should have been the guy. He was the one who brought them to that season that high up in the first place. However, with Wentz, it's a matter of injuries, and also ever since that moment, you get drafted, you get set back, but then you continuously get overshadowed by someone else. He got injured in 2017, gets put into Nick Foles. Nick Foles brings them to the Super Bowl. 2018, Wentz gets injured again. Foles comes in. Foles brings them to, I believe, the divisional round. If I'm not mistaken, he brings them to the divisional round. And then, just this past offseason, Wentz gets traded to the Indianapolis Colts, trying to get a fresh start of some sort. So with Wentz, it was a matter of bad circumstance, but also he was kind of that prone to injuries. And then you have 2017, Mitchell Trubisky, now a member of the Buffalo Bills, as Josh Allen's backup. Trubisky was a controversial pick from the get-go, because with Trubisky, if I'm not mistaken, the Bears, they drafted up from 3 to 2 just to get him. They drafted up one spot just to get him. And in what is otherwise a very stacked 2017 class, with the San Francisco 49ers not really having a need in quarterback at the time, they really took a huge leap just to get Trubisky. Deshaun Watson still on the board. Patrick Mahomes still on the board. Jamal Adams still on the board. Christian McCaffrey still on the board. The biggest knock on Trubisky, I remember, was that he was too raw. 13 games played his entire college career. He only has 1 year worth of anything worth showing. And the Bears still did anyways. It might just be because the Bears, not really a good luck team on quarterbacks. Like before Trubisky and before Andy Dalton, name me the last relevant Bears quarterback. I personally can't think of anything. Like the only Bears quarterback I can think of is Rex Grossman, who didn't really amount to anything, and Jay Cutler. That's about it. Maybe Jim McMahon. But aside from that, who else do you get who's a notable quarterback out of the Bears? You don't. And Chicago really did try their hardest to do something with Trubisky. They really tried. And I got to give it to them. They put in quite an effort. However, with Trubisky, it was just a matter of not really adjusting as well to the pro game, making a lot of mistakes, and just not really the right fit. When you have guys like Watson and Mahomes who really explode into doing everything they do, you constantly hear the memes about Trubisky and how not bad, but how bad he is in comparison to those other two guys. It really affects your head. It's kind of that whole like sibling thing, especially if you're a younger sibling or the youngest of your siblings. You always get told, why aren't you doing this thing like your older siblings? And then it kind of pisses you off a little bit. And with Trubisky, it's the exact same thing. Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl MVP. Deshaun Watson, top 5 quarterback in the league. He wins a passing yards title. He wins the college national championship. Trubisky, the best he's got is the Nickelodeon's most valuable player on the Nickelodeon's telecast of the wild card game from last year. And the memes are all over the place. You constantly hear the memes about how Trubisky got taken and got traded up for in the draft. So when you see those two things, it really affects the way that a player can really have their output for the rest of that time. And who knows if he can revive his career in Buffalo. He's got a 1-year contract as Josh Allen's backup. If for whatever reason Allen gets injured, Trubisky kind of fits that scheme a little bit. Slightly mobile quarterback. Can do a lot of the similar stuff that Josh Allen does. That fit kind of could help him. But who knows? We'll have to see once again. That's all I got for that. When we come back, an installment of a segment I have not run in a very long time. Put your money where your mouth is. It's coming back. And we've got some draft props. That's all coming up right after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Some of the latest in the NFL and the draft process. And now we're going to be going into a very near and dear to my heart subject I have not brought up in quite some time. Put your money where your mouth is. Yes, my favorite installment is coming back. I have not been able to talk betting in quite some time. And now we're going to be getting back into the whole sports gambling betting game, because the draft is coming up in only about 2.5 weeks, if my math is correct, at the time this episode is being recorded and released. So the draft is coming up quick, which means with anything in professional sports, there's going to be some sort of odds that go along with it, some sort of betting odds, whether if it is who is the number one overall draft pick or who is going to go second, where approximately is this player going to go, yes or no, whatever it may be. Now, I've been looking all around in terms of the sports betting game, and there are a lot of, let's say for the least, obvious candidates in terms of where certain players are going to go, because of the fact that in some of these instances, it's a little more concrete than you expect. You kind of get your usual suspects. In most cases, almost every single year, the quarterback that you see taken first, or whoever gets the number one overall draft pick, and oftentimes number two as well, they aren't really that unpredictable. And what I mean by that is that FanDuel has Trevor Lawrence as the super heavy favorite to get the number one overall draft pick at minus 6,000. Minus 6,000. Which means it's so overwhelmingly the favorite, it's a joke. Like, it's an actual joke. My bookie doesn't even have that as a bet because it's just too obvious. Why bother? And then for the number two overall draft pick, the whole reason I went to that whole tangent in the first place in the first segment, why I talk about the whole second place thing, is because it potentially relates to Zach Wilson, who on FanDuel is sitting at minus 3,000, and who on my bookie is sitting at minus 2,000. Because there might have been a little bit more ambiguity towards the beginning of the NFL offseason. However, the second that the Jets traded Sam Darnold and put him with Matt Rule and the Carolina system, that's when it became a lock. That's when it became, okay, the Jets are bailing on Sam Darnold. They don't want to make this a remote competition. They're going all in on Zach Wilson, who in some draft boards is the top quarterback prospects, but almost entirely across the board is number 2. And I've looked over the Pro Day highlights again. I've looked over a couple of BYU's games again. And I most certainly see it. I understand it. 100%. Now, number 3 overall is a little bit different because I've been looking across the board and there's only really 2 betting sites that I personally have any sort of trust and belief in, and it's MyBookie and FanDuel. Anything else, they're a little bit on the lower end of the totem pole. But if you're looking specifically at sports betting websites, at least according to a lot of the research that I found out, MyBookie and FanDuel sit at the top. So now that San Fran has moved all the way to number 3, there's this whole controversy and this whole questioning of who they're going to take, because there's not as much faith in Jimmy Garoppolo in the building anymore. There's questions about how healthy can he stay and how available he can be. And those questions only persist because Garoppolo has a very long injury history. Ever since he came to town with the Niners, he's performed very well, yes, but also he has been unable to stay on the field. So that availability aspect is the question as to who San Fran is going to take. Now, there's a lot of conflicting reports on who is the number 3 quarterback in the draft. Some say it's Justin Fields. Some say it's Mac Jones. Some say it's Trey Lance. Because they say that Mac Jones is sitting at minus 300 according to FanDuel. And Justin Fields is sitting at plus 250 as well. However, if you go into MyBookie, it's kind of a similar thing. So there's a lot of belief that Mac Jones is going to take number 3 overall. Minus 160 according to MyBookie, and plus 100 according to Justin Fields. But however, Trey Lance is not that very far behind. On MyBookie, he's listed at plus 300, and according to FanDuel, he's sitting at plus 350. Which is pretty, not that crazy, honestly. Put in $300, get $100 back on FanDuel. MyBookie, you go for Mac Jones, you just put in $1.60, get $1 back. But they're all within that very close ballpark. Not many people really understand how close those odds really are. Minus 300 to plus 300 is actually a very small window. That basically means it's anyone's game. That basically means even Vegas has no flippin' idea of what is going to be the pick here. And these are the guys who study so much based on the odds. And even then, they've got zero clue on what to do, on what to select. So they make them all just really close. Now, when it comes to positionally, and when it comes to those guys in a specific position, you know, first wide receiver drafted, first running back drafted, or let's say it's, you know, you take a certain player, do you think their drafting position is going to be before this pick or after this pick? It really depends a lot on the circumstances of the draft in the moment, because it's a little unpredictable. I remember my brother, he actually asked me to help him out with his betting on the draft last year. He did okay. He hit, I think, like 6 for 10 or something like that. Nothing crazy. But when you really look in depth about a lot of those odds, it really helps you see what Vegas considers the value of a certain player and how good you think that Vegas thinks a player is. Now, one example I can 100% think of is, let's go to the player that I was just mentioning, Mac Jones. There is an over-under based on where he's going to get drafted. Now, right now for Mac Jones, this is all provided by FanDuel, by the way, not sponsored. But for Mac Jones, he's sitting at 3.5 as the over-under will he get drafted. Now, in this case, in terms of betting on the draft, if you bet on a specific player, let's say Mac Jones at 3.5, if you bet the under, in this case, you believe that Mac Jones is a top 3 pick. If you bet the over on Mac Jones at 3.5, you think Mac Jones is worthy of something later than 4. 4 or later is the pick for Mac Jones. That's what you're saying. Justin Fields, for example, he's sitting at 4.5. You bet the under, you believe Justin Fields is a top 4 pick in this year's draft specifically. You bet the over on Justin Fields, the over 4.5. You think he's going at 5 or later. And especially with some of these positions, you just don't really know who's going to be the first guy taken off the board. Now with wide receiver, it's a little bit easier because almost every single scouting report, every single draft review that I've seen, it has Jamar Chase as the number 1 wide receiver in the draft. And Vegas is supporting that. It's taking Chase at minus 950, which is overwhelmingly a favorite. $900 to get 100 back is easy. And then you get some of these other guys. Some of these other guys who could go potentially after, but it's not really 100% certain. Devonta Smith at 750 plus. Jalen Waddle at 1,000 plus. And then get a bunch of these other guys in the 10,000s plus, but let's just not get into that. And then get the running backs. Now the running backs amongst these guys is a very small gap. Because right now you could get Najee Harris, running back for Alabama, sitting at minus 140 as the first running back taken off the board. However, Travis Etienne is not that far behind, staying only 150. He's got a good shot. There's definitely an opportunity for him. And then Javonte Williams sitting at plus 380 is also really close right there in terms of who's going to be the first running back that's drafted. Now, I also like how there's a section specifically on FanDuel about just Trevor Lawrence. They literally have an NFL draft tab, and one of the subjects is just Trevor Lawrence. Where is Trevor Lawrence going to get drafted? Now, the overall consensus sitting at minus 9,000. So I put $900 in to even get $100 back. $900 in to get $1 back. $9,000 to get $100 back. It's going to Jacksonville. He's going to take the time and learn under Urban Meyer. Learn that system that made those guys like R.J. Barrett, those guys like Cardale Jones, so successful in college. Alex Smith, Tebow, all those guys flourished under Urban Meyer. Now, one thing that I find really interesting is specifically where some of these specific players are considered in terms of their drafting position. One that I really find interesting is that the Alabama wide receiver tandem, the one of Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, they're sitting both at 11.5. If I'm not mistaken, number 12 is taken by the Eagles. And number 11, I really want to say, is taken up by the Giants. Both of those teams have a potential to take a wide receiver. You could definitely see them slipping a little later on the board. Maybe going to a team like New England. Maybe going to a team like Miami late in the first and 18. You could see them fall very early. You could see them maybe go to a team like Detroit or Cincinnati. Maybe Carolina adding some weapons for Sam Darnold. Who knows where they're going to go? But considering the needs that these teams need in the top 10, they're top 10 teams for a reason. They have a lot of needs. They need a lot of things. And the way I see it, with Jamar Chase most likely going to take him before either of them, I would just say take the over. I think it's a safe pick for either of them. Do I really know which one of them two is going to take him first? No, because they're very synonymous with each other, at least in terms of the way the drafting works. They're kind of seen as like a 1A, 1B type of deal. But you can really make a case for if any of these teams already have the quarterback, and if the offensive linemen, the top couple one, Slater, Sewell, if they're already taken, Pitts is taken, could see him sliding in. Let's say Trey Lance falls down the board. Only Jacksonville, the Jets, and the Niners take a quarterback. And Trey Lance falls. Or Justin Fields falls. You could see them going up. I don't see it being very likely. But just like in most of these cases, only time will tell, and we'll have to wait and see. Well, that's been it for us here in the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to say thank you once again for tuning in, and do not forget to rate us 5 stars and leave a comment every single place you go. Don't forget to share this on all your favorite social media platforms, and as well as follow us on your favorite ones, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so on and so forth. Do not forget to tune in for next week's installment, and as per usual, be sure to share us every single place you go, and leave us a comment for any suggestions you have of topics, controversies, news that you want me to go over. I will be more than happy to do so. For all of us here at the GSMC Podcast Network, this has been the GSMC College Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Lee. Have a great rest of your night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.